without further ado, let's welcome to the air ECW Original Chubby Dudley. How are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Doing great, man. We got a list of questions for you, so if you don't mind, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, do it up.
The first question I've got for you is, growing up, were you a professional wrestling fan? If so, who are some of your favorites that you looked up to?
Early on, when I first started watching pro wrestling, I was probably like 10 years old. The original ones that really caught my eye, which made me become a wrestling fan, were the Moondogs. From there, it was actually Hulk Hogan when he was a heel before his big, comeback as a champion, beating the Sheik and all. But one of the biggest early influences for me totally as a kid with wrestling was Adrian Adonis. Nice.
What was something that stuck out to you about him that really, was appealing compared to other wrestlers back then?
I just liked his whole heel attitude, his look, his everything about him. I mean, at the time, being 11, 12 years old, watching it, not really knowing much about the business, just being a kid as a wrestling fan. But then as the years went on and seeing, the Horsemen rising up and people like the Midnight Express and Coronet, those really became the major reasons why I decided to go into the wrestling business. I can remember the day I decided that I wanted to become a pro wrestler was watching on TV, I guess it was 85, 86, our time limit match on TV, Ric Flair versus Barry Windham. And that just blew me away so much. I said to myself, this is what I want to do.
Wow, very old school match. Now, you said that it was, what you obviously want to do from then on. Now, was wrestling your first career choice? If not, what did you do before wrestling?
I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be the big-time rock star. I played guitar. I played guitar in some bands. But at the time, being the 80s and the whole hair band explosion, you never saw fat guys, getting up on stage and being a pretty boy. So it became more and more easier to make that choice to go into wrestling because fat guys are more accepted in the wrestling business.
Okay, understandable. Now, during the time that you decided to break into wrestling and got training, it was a lot different than it is these days. Can you talk about your training with Larry Winters and Jimmy Gennetti?
I started training September of 1990. My original trainers were Larry Winters and Ron Shaw, who used to do WWF matches back in the early mid-'80s. Ron Shaw had left a few months into my training to just basically get out of the business and maintain his day job. And Larry became my trainer, and then Larry had gotten hurt, and Johnny Hotbody and Tony Stetson took over the training. And then I got hurt, and I busted my ankle, and I was out for 6 months. I came back, and I was training with people like Jimmy Gennetti, the Rockin' Rebel, Glenn Osborne, J.T. Smith, the Sandman, all guys that got their start in the original Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. And right when I was set to debut in early 92, Joe Goodhart pulled the plug on the TWA, and it folded. So at that point, I was like, I didn't know what to do. I thought I was screwed. And then it was only maybe a week later. It might have even been the same day. I'm not sure. It was so long ago. It's when Todd Gordon rounded up all of us, and we got together, and he announced he was going to restart the federation, but call it ECW, which was Eastern Championship Wrestling at the time. And I maintained training with Jimmy Gennetti. We had one of the guys that wrestled for TWA, John Rock. He had bought the old ring from Joel Goodhart, and he opened his own school. And we would go there 3-4 days a week with Stevie Richards, and we would go train a couple hours a day. And that was he basically finished my training, and brought me along, started bringing me around the shows, and I was basically like Gennetti's lackey, his driver, taking him to shows and all, and meet people in the business and stuff like that. And he really taught me a lot.
Now, when you were there, what was the atmosphere like at Tri-State?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was such an incredible thing. it was, I mean, it was on the verge of breaking huge. Being there, I didn't really know much about the wrestling business. When I remember when I first went there to try out, I never knew a independent wrestling scene even existed. I only knew, WWF at the time and NWA or / WCW at the time. This was 1990. So when a friend of mine, actually my brother-in-law at the time, was working during the day with the Rock and Rebel, and that's how I got my first tryout. Was Rebel gave me Goodhart's number, and I called Joe Goodhart, went up for the tryout with some friends of mine, and we got started, and I became part of that family, and it was a family. I mean, to this day, I still remain very close with a lot of these people who, taught me the business. We hung out a lot, and we remained friends. It's 20 years later now. I mean, it was scary to think 20 years ago I started in the wrestling business.
Now, you actually started wrestling in the original ECW, going way back to Eastern Championship Wrestling as Easy Rider. Whose idea was it for that character, and were you originally in favor or against the idea?
Actually, when the idea was brought to us, it was brought to us by Joe Goodhart, because they really weren't sure what they were going to do with me, and my partner, who was training at the time, also was a HD rider. He was a biker. He rode a Harley, had that biker look, and I always was told I had a biker look between the long hair and the tattoos and the scruff and all. So they decided to team us up, and actually Jimmy Gennetti is the one that came up with the name the Hell Riders, and he named each of us. And I was honored by the whole gimmick and all, because it reminded me of Adrian Adonis when he was doing the biker gimmick. So I was ecstatic over it.
Very understandable. Now, my co-host Andrew Carlick has a few questions for you. So, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, can you talk about being one of the original guys from ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling, to also work for Extreme Championship Wrestling? That's a very select group.
Well, I mean, that's kind of funny, because I see that you put up on the flyer that was, being spread around Facebook and everything, ECW Original. And, I mean, that's true. And I'm an ECW Original. And I see a lot of the other boys from the Extreme days put that out there, that they're an ECW Original, when really they're not. I mean, I was there from day one in 1992. I was there in the old wrestling down in Philly at the Chestnut Cabaret, the sports bar we were still running shows out of. I was part of the TV tapings for the pilots to get on the sports channel. I was there for all that stuff. I remember I used to help Todd Gordon do a lot of promotions. I would go out to the areas, neighborhoods where we were doing shows, and me and some of the other boys, we would go and we'd be putting out the posters and the flyers and doing all that legwork for Todd, because he had his business to worry about, the jewelry store. So we would do all that stuff. And I mean, I remember going into his office one day to pick up flyers and tickets and posters, and he sat me down, and it was a good friend of mine, Frank Cody, who I wrestled a lot with through the years, and he told us, he's like, here's what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? And he told us he was bringing in Eddie Gilbert to take over the booking. And I was like, I was flabbergasted. I was like, this is going to blow up. And I was so excited, because I was a huge Eddie Gilbert mark. He was one of my favorites, throughout the years. I was like, this is going to be great, because I loved Eddie's style of booking when he was there at UWF and old Mid-South Wrestling. So I was like, this is going to be incredible. And then Eddie came in, and slowly you saw it change, where all the Philly guys, the couple New York guys that would come down, some guys from like out in Harrisburg area, one by one, each week we would come to a show, one of us would be gone. So you slowly saw the writing on the wall, because Eddie was bringing in people with bigger names and more experience, and B, he was bringing in his own voice. He was bringing people up from down south, and probably I did the first 2 set of tapings, maybe 3 sets, I think the last tapings I did was Paulie Dangerously's first show with ECW. And actually, if you go back in ECW TV history, the very first match on TV was me and my old partner HD against the Super Destroyers.
Yeah, that segues well into my next question, is because in those early days you did wrestle against the Super Destroyers quite a bit. Do you have any memories working with them?
Steph, a great learning experience, because one of the Super Destroyers was AJ Petruzzi, who, the guy was probably 20 years older than me at the time, and he had been around the block and did a lot of work for WWF, and I remember watching him on TV growing up. So he was a great guy, and his partner Doug from Maryland, both were great guys, and we would sit back in the locker room and laugh and joke like best of friends and have a good time, go out there and do our matches. But it was such a learning experience with being in there with AJ, because I was only working shows 6 months, and most of our matches they had us feuding with the Super Destroyers before Eddie Gilbert came in.
Now, speaking of Eddie Gilbert, everyone knows that he passed away too early. What are some of your fondest memories of the late Eddie Gilbert?
Eddie Gilbert, like I said, he was one of my favorites. I thought he was an excellent worker, a great mind for the business. I loved the things he did booking, like I said, back in Mid-South, UWF. When he came to ECW, he did some good things, but I don't think booking-wise it was on the level of what it was earlier in his career. I was honored to have shared a locker room with the guy, to have got to meet him. A weird story is, too, after he was let go by Todd, he was down in Puerto Rico, where he later passed away. And a couple guys from the Philly area, Derek Domino and Harley Lewis. Harley Lewis was in talks with Eddie about going down to Puerto Rico. And myself and Derek Domino were going to go down to Puerto Rico for a little bit and work down there. And Eddie unfortunately passed away.
It was definitely much too early. You actually left Eastern Championship Wrestling and were not there for the change to Extreme. You came back a little later. But in that time away, you were working a lot in the Mid-Atlantic Indies, and also worked for the Delaware-based East Coast Wrestling Association. What are some of your fondest memories from that particular run of yours?
I'll tell you what, ECWA, when I wrestled for them, that was 93 to 95. And I went there and I started as a singles wrestler. And they had their top babyface there at the time was Boogie Woogie Brown, who was a 450-pound black guy who you would have thought when he walked in that building like it was Hulk Hogan coming to Madison Square Garden. He would light up a building like no other I saw in the indie scene. It was incredible. And I was honored to work with this guy. And he was an older gentleman. He was, 20-something years older than me. He was a school teacher. And he was just a happy-go-lucky guy who was honored to be in the ring. And I feuded with him for probably about 6 months. And the weird thing about ECWA at the time was all the guys that wrestled for Jim Kettner were all guys that Jim trained himself. He didn't bring in outside talent. I was one of the first guys he brought in from the outside, thanks to a mutual friend of ours. And he brought in, from time to time, a local guy called Mike Kaluit, King Kaluit. And then he started bringing me in and feuding me with Boogie Woogie Brown. But the thing that was weird, where, I went to wrestling school and I was trained and I was taught how to bump and I was taught how to do this and taught how to call a match and work a match. And these guys were not trained that way. Jim trained these guys by a script where he would literally have a script to the match. And it was like typed out, and it was down and detailed to each punch, kick, the spots, and everything. And you had to memorize your match. So you would literally go down to Jim's apartment, and he had his back bedroom set up with padding, and he would stand in there with you in this room, and you would walk through your match, and you would do this like 2-3 times leading up to the show. And that's how he trained his guys, and it worked for him. It was incredible. It was a weird situation coming from a total opposite situation, but at the time it was working for him. He was drawing great indie house shows. He would do a big, like his WrestleMania once a year, and I was at a semi-main event against Boogie on one of those shows, and he drew like over 1,500 people to this place. I mean, for a small, at the time, unknown independent, that's incredible.
Yeah, now, it certainly sounds like you had a very full career there. Now, back in 1994, you did reappear in what was now known as Extreme Championship Wrestling as Chubby Dudley. And for the fans who don't know, you were, in a way, kind of like a comic relief to the seriousness of the Dudley clan, especially as they went further along. Were you in favor of this particular role, or would you have preferred to do a little bit more wrestling?
I would have loved to do more wrestling. The whole thing happened. The Dudleys were started, and it was Dudley, Little Snot, and Big Dick. And they were there for probably about a month. And I remember sitting there watching the show each week, and I was saying to myself, my God, I look like these friggin' guys. It's scary. And I was still talking with Steve Richards, who had just gotten his start there with Raven and all. And I was hanging out at the hotel one night after one of the shows. I was hanging with Richards, talking with Richards and all, and he said to me, he goes, you should be a Dudley. I'm like, let's do it. I said, like, get me in. He's like, let me talk to Scotty. So he talked to Scotty, and who's Raven, and he introduced me to Raven, which Raven had worked for me on the first show I promoted in '94, a few months earlier. So I had already had it in with Scotty. So Scotty was like, yeah, definitely. Come in. Let's do it. So they had me come out to a show and to meet Paul. And as soon as I met Paul, he took one look and he goes, you got to be friggin' kidding me. Another Dudley? He's like, you're in. Go buy a tie-dye shirt. Be here next week. And that's how I got in.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't realize that the Dudley boys that became the most popular, the Bubba Ray and Devon, they were one of the last parts of Dudley. Guys like you and
Yeah.
Dudley and Big Dick Dudley, they were kind of the backbone that kind of had that storyline going along for up until that point.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I was there before Bubba and Devon. Me and Dances with Dudley, we both started the same night. Then it was Stein Guy came in a few weeks afterwards, and then Bubba, or vice versa. We all came in pretty close together, the four of us. And then it was we were just doing the comedy matches and opening match stuff. And then Devon came in probably about 6 months later. And then Spike came in right before I left, which was in '96. He was the last one to come in. But he came in, it was a while after Devon was already there.
Now, whose idea was it for you to carry junk food to the ring with you?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, whose idea was it for you to carry, if I'm not mistaken, during that time, you would occasionally carry like junk food to the ring with you, like bags of potato chips and things like that? Whose idea was that?
Actually, that was me and a friend of mine, Frank Cody. I used to bring in pizza, hoagies, potato chips, cereal, donuts, just, any food. I would stop on the way at the local convenience store and grab something and bring it with me. If it made it to the ring. A lot of times, guys like the Eliminators or Jericho or somebody was always, like, Jericho was a huge one. But if I was bringing cereal, he was always trying to steal my Cocoa Puffs.
Now, you were driven out of VCW, storyline-wise at least, by Devon Dudley. What are your opinions of Devon, and was there ever any heat between the two of you?
No heat between none of them. Devon, great guy. From the time he came in, he was a very humble person who he knew he was fresh in the business, so he knew he was no man on the totem pole, and he was there and he wanted to learn, and he realized what he had in front of him, the opportunity, and he was a good dude.
Okay, now JT's back with us. He's got a few more questions for you, so JT, go ahead.
Yeah, now I know
Okay.
I know you talked a little bit about wanting to be a big rocker back in the day. Can you talk a little bit more about your band?
Back then it was the whole hair band craze. So I was playing in a band. We never even started playing out. It was just it was going towards it, working on it, trying to do like Motley Crue, Poison type stuff like that. And I had a falling out with the guy, the other guitar player. He was screwed up on drugs, and he actually broke into somebody's house to try to rip them off. And here, the guy's house he broke into was a cop, and he got arrested. And I was like, you know what? I don't need this. And that's when I decided I took my guitar, my amplifier, and I sold it. And I got my down payment for wrestling school.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
But then I played. At the time when I got, it was around 90. It was 94. When I was out of ECW, before I went back as in Extreme, a childhood friend of mine who, to this day, I've been friends with this guy for 35 years, and we started a punk band called the Dead Rubber Babies, and we played all around the Philly, Jersey, Delaware area for like 16, 17 years. We actually just broke up last year.
Oh wow, nice. Now, you began promoting Liberty All-Star Wrestling in 1994. Who are some of the talent that came through there for those that are unaware about the company?
A laundry list. Like I said, the first show I had Scotty, who was Raven, but this was before he became Raven. It was right after he left WCW. He was Scotty Flamingo. So he worked for me. Richards worked for me a lot. Ted Petty worked for me. Simon Diamond, before he was Simon Diamond, he was called Lance Diamond, worked for me. And actually, he was one of Jim Kettner's original guys, too. That's where I met him at. He, another great guy. I haven't seen him in years, but great guy. Thomas Rodman, who was part of the BWO. I actually trained him out of my wrestling school. Oh, my God. The list is Al Perez we had as our champion when we ended up closing up shop in 2002. Tommy Dreamer. I mean, a laundry list. I mean, so many of the guys that went on to either WWF or ECW, they made a stop in LEW at some point.
Now, what ultimately led to the demise of the company?
No money. No money. I started it in 94, ran shows for a few years, and while I was also back in ECW as Chubby Dudley, was running shows, and I think that was, I don't know if this to be fact, but it was my own thinking was Paul wasn't going to, push me as a character if I'm out worried about my own product and pushing my own product, which I was, understandable, and I was just happy to be there, and I realized that he wasn't going to do nothing with me. But I did that for a few years, and then I left the business for like 2 years. I had gotten married in 97, had my first child, so I was like, wrestling's not really a good thing to be doing right now. And then I started getting the itch, and I started running shows again in 99, and I ran shows from 99 up through mid-2002, and I was trying to, trying to do too much, where I was my goal was to run shows every weekend. I wanted to run like old school back Memphis days. I wanted to run 4 different towns each week, go around and, you know, run the territory, and I wanted to eventually get TV and all. But I was trying to push these to get these going, but the crowds were not there. I mean, I was trying to do too much, and I had Combat Zone running in the area, plus Ring of Honor had started. So people were going and spending their money there instead of coming to us. So
now my next question for you is, you know, like you said, you just recently started getting back into it. What have you been up to, man? I mean, like, honestly, I know you've been doing some conventions, but what else are you got going on?
you know what? That's going to be probably about it. Actually, I did the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance restarted. It's about a year and a half ago, and they're running out of Jersey, and they actually did a show in PA last summer, and one of the guys who's running it is one of the old originals. Well, actually, the 2 guys running it are 2 of the old originals. And they called me up and they said, hey, we're going to do Battle Royal. We're going to do a reunion Battle Royal of all the old TWA guys. Do you want to take part in it? I said, you know what? Yeah, I'd love to. So I did that. And at that show, I met this guy, RC, who does CompletelyDamaged.com, which he does video interviews. He goes around to independent wrestling shows and wrestling conventions, and he does interviews with a lot of the boys. So he friended me on Facebook, and he said, you know, we really hit it off that night. We talked for a while. He's like, I'd like you to, you know, give me a hand with Completely Damaged and, you know, show me the way and show me how to, you know, conduct things and handle myself around the wrestling business. So I've decided to team up with RC, and I'm helping him with his CompletelyDamaged.com now. So we're going around. We've been doing some wrestling conventions in the area. We're going to be at the next one coming up in April at the Ramada in Philly. There's a WrestleFest. We'll be there. We're possibly in the New York area in May. I'm not sure yet. The Legends of the Ring. That's basically it. At this point, I'm going to be 41 years old in a couple months. I feel like an old man. I mean, my body went through a lot in 13 straight years of wrestling. And I don't have the burning desire like I used to. I'm quite happy at this point just to go out, do a convention every so often, see old friends, meet fans who remember me. You know, and I was very honored. The last one we did back in December, a lot of people having me sign ECW books and programs, and I was very honored by that. Taken back that a lot of people remember me. It was a lot of fun. So I'm quite happy doing that. I really don't. I was thinking about getting back in the ring, but I think it's safer staying on doing conventions.
Okay. Now, how can a convention booker get a hold of you?
Right on Facebook. I have a Chubby Dudley page on Facebook, or you can just look for me at my personal account, Bay Ragney. And I also just signed up on Twitter last night. I'm still not too impressed with that whole thing, but yeah, just look for me on Facebook, Chubby Dudley or Bay Ragney.
Okay. Now, do you have a rib or a road story you can share with our listeners?
If Billy Real is listening, he'll probably pop huge for this one. A funny one was Dennis Carluzzo used to run the old NWA New Jersey, and I forget what it was called before that. The WWA, I think. Dennis was a promoter, also was on the first couple UW or UFC pay-per-views with Dan Severn. He was in Severn's corner. He had Dan Severn as the NWA champ at the time. Billy Real, a local wrestler from the Philly area. He, little guy, he was a kid at the time too. He was probably like 18, 19 years old. Billy was a real wise-ass little kid who thought he knew it all, thought he was, the hot shit, the hot guy on the up-and-coming indie scene, and thought he deserved this and that and everything. So they turned around and said to him, "Oh, Billy, tonight you're working Severn." He's like, oh, okay. And they were like, yeah, and you're going over for him with getting the belt off him. He's like, what? We're like, yeah, you're getting the belt off him. He's like, no way. So he's like, all like, all right. We're like, yeah, but Severn's pissed. He's going to drop the belt to you. He's like, what? So Severn was in on it. Severn's going around. He's throwing chairs in the locker room. He's screaming, I got to drop a belt to this kid. I can't believe you guys are making me do this. And Billy was shitting himself. He literally was almost throwing up. He was getting ready to start crying. It's one of the funniest things I ever saw. Severn went up to him and threw him up against the wall like he was going to hit him, and then he like tickled him and started laughing at him.
That's fucking great. Now, do you have any final words for your fans that are listening?
Thank you. Thank you for remembering me. A lot of good times I had. Thank you. And if you see me at a convention, bring me some food.
I want to thank you for coming on the broadcast tonight.
Hey, no problem, man. It was a lot of fun. Actually, a funny thing is, too, I'm sitting out in my car right now in front of my house, and in my house right now, our dinner guest tonight was Blue Meanie and his girlfriend, Tracy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we get together like once a month and do dinner. So, yeah, he's sitting in my house drinking beer and eating a piece of rum and chocolate cake.
Sounds good. Well, thank you again for coming on tonight. Once again, that's completely.damaged.com, correct?
Correct. Hit it up. Look for them on Facebook. They're also on Twitter. And check out the webpage. We're going to be revamping the webpage hopefully within the next month. But you can go on there and actually look for it on YouTube, too. There's a ton of interviews with a lot of big-name guys in there, a lot of interesting stuff. So there was a Matt Hardy interview we did at the last convention, a bunch of Axel Rotten interviews. Axel, very funny interviews on there. Good stuff. Check it out.
All right. Thank you once again. And fans, check out completely.damaged.com. And, yeah, once again, thank you very much.
No problem, guys. Thank you.
All right.